I'm Gene, and this is Perfect Flow. I'm a New Zealand-based athlete and coach focused on optimizing performance, health, and well-being. I have a professional background in biomedical engineering, but I've chosen to follow my more immediate passions of running, endurance, adventure, movement, nutrition, science, lifestyle, community, psychology, and personal growth. My mission is to connect with bright minds and extract the information I need to live a life that makes sense and feels good, and share those conversations right here. Apart from your favorite podcast app, the best places to follow my work are at perfectflow.nz, genebeveridge.nz, and Perfect Flow on Facebook. Enjoy the show.
What's up, guys? Gene here. Welcome back. I'm spending some really good time in Christchurch at the moment. I'm down here for New Zealand Orienteering Champs, heading down to Oamaru in the next few days, and I thought I'd just have a few comments on training and how I've prepared for that. I talk about this concept of knowing your goal, and for me, I have to say that New Zealand Champs is not an A goal, it's a B goal. So for me that means I might adjust training slightly or be a little bit more cautious about my form leading into racing, but it's not the be all and end all. You have to accept that the more racing you do, the more races you have to leave up to chance and not taper coming into them if you want to get the most out of your A goal, which for me is World Orienteering Champs in July. So I know a few people were surprised to hear that I'm not tapering for the racing coming up, and that's something you have to expect. And the irony of the situation is both national titles that I've won in the past 2 years were under the same scenario. They were not A goals, they were B goals, and they were both early in the training block, and I had good form on the day, but that was largely up to chance. At the start of a training block, it's hard to know how your body's handling and whether it's picked up form really quickly or whether it's still lingering, as it sometimes does for many months before you finally kick into really good shape. So it's up to chance how I feel when I hit the start line, and whatever happens, I'm not going to beat myself up. I know where the big goals are moving forward. So hopefully that's a little take-home point for all those who love racing but get a little nervous about their results coming into all these races. You have to know what you value and what you don't, and you can't value every race too highly, otherwise you'd be in an eternal taper and you never get the goods done. So yeah, apart from that, training's going well and I'm fit, although I'm a bit broken at the moment, but sore actually, not injury broken, but it's very good every once in a while in a training block for those of us who do trail running and off-road stuff to do something really hilly and just bomb a big downhill. And yeah, my quads are pretty thrash from a big downhill I did yesterday in Castle Hill in the foothills of the Alps there, and it's really good to bomb a downhill, I think, and just get that extra soft tissue conditioning that you often miss if you're on the road, not doing any huge descents like that. So I'm a bit sore, and I think I'll recover nicely over the next few days. I feel like my body's bouncing back pretty quickly from everything. So yeah, that's really something just little to share. But what else do we have? So this podcast that I'm sharing today is with Claire Akin-Smith. So Claire and I met a few years ago when we were both being supported by Icebug when they were in New Zealand. And we did some runs together, and that was really good. She's a strong trail runner, but what's most fascinating about her is she was a physio who kind of left the normal line of her normal professional expected career path and declared herself a movement specialist. Started her own business called Applied Movement, and she focuses on a more holistic approach to dealing with people's injuries and any musculoskeletal pain, movement problems. And I've done some work with her personally, and I really rate her insights into how we move and where our points of pain and points of potential improvement are. She's got great eyes and is a really good person to bounce ideas off and try to figure out these complex biomechanical problems that a lot of us struggle with. If you go to a physio and they give you a quick fix, I'm very skeptical that that's going to be the fix. There are so many interacting parts in the human body, and it often takes a lot of work and a lot of testing and trial and error to find out exactly what the problem is for you. What works for one person is not going to work for everyone. So I think Claire's methodology is fantastic, and I think it fits really well with my earlier podcast with Luke McCullum on pain, stress, and fascia. And it also fits really well with the podcast I've just recorded, but we'll be releasing in a couple of weeks maybe, with Hazel Boot, who has a very similar train of thought to Claire. And I think this newer movement stemming from physiology and exercise science is, I think, more powerful than the default sports physiology approach at the moment. I think the evidence base we've got on the human body is great, but we need a more individualized approach to take the next step. And I think these are some local leaders in this field, and it's great to be able to sit down and talk to them. And I hope you guys get a lot of information from this as well. There's a lot to think about, and it's more about developing a good process for assessing your own body and giving you the tools to take that further forwards. If you're actually serious about making improvements in the way you move and improving your performance in that way, then yeah, you need to take a more thorough and less urgent approach to understanding and solving these problems. So that's my 2 cents on this area, and why I'm going to continue probing into it as I try to improve my own movement and performance, and of course share it with all the listeners. So if you're enjoying things so far, expect more of it. I bring you Claire Akin-Smith.
Claire, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So
unexpected pleasure.
Yeah, it was very late notice, so it's super cool to have you on board. How are you doing out of Auckland? How long have you been away?
So moved down to Wanaka last August and have not looked back. Was always the plan over a couple of years, and since last August come back to visit Auckland regularly, still seeing clients, doing work and fun stuff. And fortunately you caught me just on a weekend before I'm about to go back.
Yeah, Wanaka sounds like a great place to be.
It really is.
Are you making the most of the running down there? Are you still doing as much running as you used to, or have you diversified a bit more in your outlets?
Well, probably a bit more, to be honest. The opportunity to run in terrain that really does excite me. I was very, very and enjoy running on bush trails, but my heart has always really been in alpine and mountainous. So to be able to step out of my door and just pop up into the hills is just fantastic. So yeah, being in Wanaka, I'm probably doing a little bit more. I've done a few local events just to get to know the trails more, but I'm also just enjoying everything about it. Being in the lake, riding a bike. So
yeah, that's super cool. I've got a trip down there in February, and yeah, we're lining up each day. What mission are we going to do on each day? So it's super cool. And you also have managed to move away from the sadness of the Waitakere Ranges in Auckland at a very good time. Yeah, a lot of us would love to get back in there, but it's an unfortunate situation. So there's definitely some appeal about moving elsewhere in New Zealand. But what I really wanted to talk to you about is movement and your experience, and how the jobs you've had in the past have got you to the particular views you hold now. And let's wind it back a little bit and tell us about how you got into being a physiotherapist is how you started, right? And you followed your education in the UK. So talk us through how that might be a little different to what we're used to in New Zealand.
Yeah, interesting. Personally, I got into being a physio because of really wanting to learn more about physical capability and health. And my main awareness, obviously, is to go through the medicine and the therapy side in order to both have further education and to become a professional in something, but very much to have the knowledge to help myself as well. So in doing that, I worked really hard in order to get a place in university, to get on the course to do physio. Very difficult at the time. And I thought, yes, that's it. I'm now going to get qualified to be a physio, so therefore I'm going to know everything, and it's going to be great to keep myself working really well and to help everybody and everything. And at the end of the course, you get your badge and you head off into being qualified, and you start doing your junior rotations, which I think is not what is so much the standard here. It's much more... you qualify as a physio in the UK, but you then start very similar to a junior doctor, and you then go into your different areas of specialty, and you have to do at least 3-4 months, if not 5-6.
So is it that the courses kind of join at some stage? You actually start studying as a physio, and then you kind of merge back onto the medical system? Is that how you're describing it, or have I got the wrong side of that?
So it's separate from being from the purely medicine undergraduate to graduate qualifications, but it follows a similar route. So when you've done your 3 years, technically you've got your Bachelor of Science, but then there is the expectation that you'll do at least 2 years of working in various areas very much as a junior. So you're qualified, but it's recognised you don't really know very much.
I see. So it's very similar. And I think in New Zealand you do your 3 or 4 years and kind of get your certificate and
off you go.
Try to get a job.
You'll be shop front, seeing clients, patients, and in some, generally the musculoskeletal area, or you might stay acute and work in a hospital. But certainly what I felt was a huge benefit was the years spent gaining that greater understanding and expertise. So working with all sorts of quite sick people, from intensive care right through to surgery, so post-cardiac surgery or post-stroke, or orthopedics, both trauma and elective, and working with medical specialists in those fields as well. So consultants that have got 20, 30 years of experience, and as scary as they might be, also learning from them. And it's from there that a therapist will then choose, well, which area do they really want to progress into? And for myself, it was then, yes, I want to do more working with people that are injured or not moving very well, but are fundamentally healthy. So rather than working in an inpatient situation, effectively in primary care, so working with people that they're moving but they've got a bit that doesn't work very well.
So the alternative, the in care, there's a inpatient care, is that a lot of accidents, or is there some degenerative stuff that you also deal with if you were to have moved in that direction?
The acute, yes.
I'm imagining car crashes and people trying to rehabilitate limbs that have been severely damaged.
And physio also has a place in other areas of medicine. So you would have a physio who works on intensive care, purely working alongside the nurses to help people whilst they're on ventilation. So they're acutely sick, and you're part of the team that would help them to maintain patency through the airways in order to stay alive, and then if opportunity allows, obviously you're helping them to get back through to a place of independence. But similarly in other fields of medicine. So you might have people that have just had lung surgery because of cancer, or some other kind of internal surgery, but you're working with them because they've had a massive opening through the centre of them and you're getting them out of bed. That kind of acute stuff where you've got to be aware of lots of other systems that obviously work together for health, as opposed to just musculoskeletal, which is what you would be more expertised in and focusing primarily on in a primary care situation. So, yeah.
So you made your choice and you wanted to work with healthier people. And then what jobs did you have once you moved out of study and into the workforce?
Yeah, so then effectively you graduate from being a junior to a senior, and in that senior post you might still do rotations, but you'll be focusing more on one kind of area. And I then worked alongside orthopods and rheumatologists in the area of what in the UK is called outpatients, which really would be the same as a walk-in clinic here, where you've done your knee or ankle, or you've got a back problem, those kinds of issues. And I worked as a senior with other professionals, greater experience and support, and you effectively go up the ranks to the point where you are teaching people, or younger, less experienced therapists, as well as carrying your own caseload, as well as doing peer supervision with others, and it being multidisciplinary. So you're working with GPs, you're working with orthopods, and that was awesome because of further gaining experience, primarily from a medical point of view. You're still working within a system that people are presenting to you, and in the UK it's free at the point of access, but that health system has its limitations, and one of which is long time waits in order for someone to get access to the treatment. So as much as you're trying to help someone, they may have had that issue for 3 months, 6 months, and obviously there is the implications of that and the limitations of what you can do relative to the time that you've got with them and their motivation to help themselves. And that was always something that really bugged me. And what you can do within a medical system and what you're qualified to do means that there's only so much that you can actively help an individual in front of you.
Does that are you kind of hinting at standard of care, or is that a slightly different concept? What's the limitation? What's preventing you from doing what you believe to be the right thing?
Yeah. So I think there is, when someone presents to the medical system, they are seeking help for their physical ails. But what I became clearer and clearer on as I seeked to help people with their physical ails is that there's so much more to an individual sorting themselves out from a physical point of view than one is able to do so from addressing just the presenting symptoms, or working out, well, what is the diagnosis, and therefore how do you start to go about correcting it?
Yeah, it speaks to a few things, like how interrelated many of our problems are, and also the human desire to compartmentalize everything, including people's professions and jobs and the scope of their work during the day. We are seeing some change and more of a push towards functional medicine and just whatever works, and it's great to see. And I don't come through.
In any way want to sound derogatory about UK medical system or any other what would be called healthcare system in the world today. It's doing its best from a background of helping people to stay alive, and I think there is an incredible heritage and history in the health service in the UK as there is here in New Zealand. But I think modern societies are now at a stage where that medical system helps people stay physically alive, but there is another need to support people in helping to be well, and that has so many facets that the medical system per se can't address in its own right, and those working directly within the medical system aren't in the right place to address all of those things.
Totally share that concern, and it's great that over the years we've mobilized as humankind to kind of optimize this objective of making people live longer, and we've really done a great job at it. So I think you're noticing that as we get closer towards that objective, we realize maybe that's not actually the best objective. Maybe we want to have people being active for longer, as opposed to getting a high number on the clock when they finally tap out.
Yeah, for sure. It's quality of life, and because physical health and capability is so intrinsically linked to looking after actively your physical capability, and at the same time in our society, modern day life necessitates less and less and less of needing to be physically capable. We've got these two juxtapositions where people are saying, well, I want to be well, and I want to live longer, and I want to be happy, but at the same time there's nothing in their life that predisposes them to be doing stuff that is supporting that aspiration. But there's all sorts of priorities that are working against it, and where people once assumed that they could take it for granted that so long as they don't overeat or they don't over indulge in whatever clearly unhealthy way, they would be okay. Unfortunately, that's now not the case. And certainly within a medical system, where I got to was just seeing people who were at much more the end of the line, where I was able to keep them away from surgery, reaching the senior positions that I did. But even then, it was still seeing the inadequacy of the situation, as opposed to truly being able to make a difference in any of the individuals' lives as far as I wanted to.
Yeah, so did you see that ideal early on, or did it slowly grow on you on the years? And at which stage did you create this title, movement specialist? Yeah, so there was a stage where you wanted to be something different.
Totally.
And yeah, talk us through that process, and how old were you when you decided you wanted to branch out from the path before you?
Yeah, I think it has been a process of my own self-learning, actualization, maturing, gaining confidence in me, and I truly believe that professional expertise and authority comes from personal development and experiences. And as much as I thought I could be the best that I could be for people once I had been able to get my qualification, and then I got further qualifications and thought I'd be even better, and there was always that aspiring to be what I thought I needed to be. And in fact, it was only towards the end of my master's that I realized it's not about the letters after your name. It's not about the knowledge that you have. It's about your confidence in who you are and what you have to provide to the world as who you are, and then channeled into whatever it is that you choose to be or do in that moment. So I think it was for sure the gaining of confidence in myself as a person, and sounds a bit of a digression from what I've been talking about as a movement specialist and me doing stuff professionally, but it was actually myself, understanding who I am as a person, coming to love and appreciate myself, and then recognizing some of the stresses and pressures that I'd put upon myself to try and be something. And in addressing those, then finding the freedom to go, well, actually, how can I best serve people and help people in a way that I would like to? And I think it was with that relaxing somewhat and starting to enjoy life myself, and then appreciating my uniqueness, that I was then able to see further the holes within the system, as well as private practice, and the difference between cultivating performance and high level physical excellence, and dis-ease, ill health, illness, and trying to enable people to restore themselves from that end, and this massive gulf in between, and recognizing, well, I can't do it all. What can I do? And that greater and greater clarity of the gap, and, well, what would I like to do that's true to how I want to live my life and what I want to do in my life, alongside make a difference, came at the same time as making my own life choices around, well, where do I want to live in the world? What do I want to have my future look like? So very long answer to your question. In moving from the UK to New Zealand, it was at a time when my husband and I started to question, well, we've chosen not to have kids. We've had a great life thus far. We have had lots of experiences. We had both done various things throughout careers, had great friends, and a very, in every sense, successful up into 30s kind of journey. But then suddenly going, well, yeah, but 10 years could go by and actually we would still look the same. This wouldn't be any different. And for myself professionally, that became very challenging because, again, in the medical system, once you've done your time and you've reached that consultant status, or you kind of just keep going. You do the same clinics, you don't have to do as many on-calls, or you get more perks because you've been around longer. But effectively, you've done your time, you've earned your credit, and so you become that pillar of authority. And that's as much as it is. And I felt like, well, blimey, I've done all of this, I know all this stuff, and that's it. And I wanted to do more, and so that forced me into, okay, well, it's going to have to be outside of the institutional limitations within which I have worked.
If you had felt that there was a way to influence the system more, would you have stayed in the system? Is it that you got to being a consultant and found that that was the top rung, as opposed to there being another top rung where you can be more of a manager and influencer? Does that describe it? Yeah,
totally. And really, the options within any institution is my assumption in terms of, other public services. You get as good as you can be as the face front person. So in my world, that would be as a clinician. And then you have two options. Either it is to become a manager, so you then lose connection as directly the professional and the training that you've done and using that, or you then go into education, and so you can retain your usefulness as a clinician because you can be teaching students of whatever level, and you can also contribute to research, which technically long distance will create knowledge and understanding that could shape the future. But none of those really excited me. I got to the end of my master's and went, no way, I'm never doing another piece of research.
Don't want to go in the
lab. And equally, it was great to be teaching students, which I did quite a lot, but it was still within certain norms and certain ways of practice.
We're very good at creating these information hierarchies, and they function really well at the job they were created to optimize, but they can be really clunky when you realize that they're not doing the job you now want it to do. So there is that dilemma: try to grind and change the system, or leave, and maybe you can be successful elsewhere, and then after 5 years of showing, hey guys, this is another way to do things, perhaps the influence, it's really hard to know. We'll know in hindsight what was the best way to do it, but I think we need people on both sides. We need some people to be shouting from the inside, and we need people to be waving their flags from the outside, that we have to make progress. And this is like you were saying before, it's not that you're having a go at the system, this is progress. We have to become smarter in the system, but we also have to change systems as we understand humans better. And in terms of understanding humans better, how do you describe your job? Movement specialist is just 2 words. I'm sure if you could have a whole sentence, you would add more to it. How does that relate to concepts like holistic medicine or preventative medicine? Do you feel like you're still more reactionary with the clients you're seeing? Is it more preventative? Just tell me how it relates, how you see your job relating to those concepts.
For sure, it's a work in progress for myself. I think certainly the confidence that I have now in how I work with any given individual that comes towards me is very different to what it was 5 years ago, when I effectively set up my stand, called myself something in order for people to be interested. And then hoped that what I then delivered would be something that they felt worthy of paying the money for. At the end of the day, one has to work, yes, as a passion, hopefully, but also to pay the overheads of one's living. And I hoped that I would be able to support both, and started out with the desire to help people move at the both ends. So I described earlier the coming through from illness or dis-ease or lack of capability, injury.
So that's a reaction. They've had something in their life that hits them in the face, and I need to deal with this. Who do I see? So there's those people.
And then immediately at the other end, there is the people that are working really hard to be the best that they can be, and they already have the support within the field that they are wanting to excel in or are working very hard in. So they've seen the coach that is helping them within if they're in a team situation, or they've seen the person that is helping them from a specific sport skill, but they know that it's not working quite the way that it could, should, they actually just want another opinion that is a step back from where they're at. And I have always sought to be the clinician that empowers an individual to move further into their passion in whatever physical movement that it is, as opposed to anybody become dependent on me to help them go forward. So I think my point of difference relative to other professionals is that I have the background to be an authority to drop some knowledge, some information, some feedback into a person's life, and they can take that on and go, oh yeah, great, and then apply it. And that might be alongside a personal trainer, a coach, some kind of team manager, and all of those people and professionals absolutely have their place as well. But I think the relevance of it is both at that end, where there's someone just putting all the bits together, similarly to the person who's coming out of illness, dis-ease, complete disaster, where they might have even seen quite a few specialists about the thing. But nobody has been able to look at the bigger picture of that person's life. And what I mean by that is their physical history, how they're moving now as a whole person, and what other influences in their life, in their history and now, will be affecting their situation. So I think as a movement specialist, that's what I have to offer. And over the 5 years that I've been working independently, staying true to my competence, which is off the background of being a qualified physiotherapist, but also recognizing the other aspects of life that I have to note. I'm able to bring a different series of thoughts and conclusions and ideas and perspective to the individual in front of me.
Yeah, and we see this in really high concentration in the most highest performing people in the world. You see a really high concentration of mentors and advisors and other professionals, because those people, I think part of being so successful is they've seen the value in the alternative perspective. Even if it's somebody to challenge them with like a devil's advocate perspective, it makes you stronger and more confident in your own beliefs, or it tells you that the way you're doing something is wrong. And the sooner you find that out, the better. Totally. So I think everyone, whether you're at the less experienced end of some sport or the more experienced end, having an alternative view, alternative meaning just different to the current, whatever you're currently doing, find someone who can describe it differently. I think that's where learning comes in. And yeah, it's great to see physios taking that approach and shaking things up, and healthcare providers everywhere taking a different approach, a challenging approach that might be wrong many times, but the sooner we go there, the sooner we realize what things we need to keep and what things we need to stay away. But yeah, huge strength in having an alternative perspective onto some of these issues. So you're dealing with people who have physical problems or some challenge they're trying to overcome. Can you talk us through a typical patient, or maybe an interesting patient, of course, anonymized, of course. Just what happens in your setting that might be a little bit different to what happens at the standard physio that we might see?
Yeah, so I think first off, it's immediately applying knowledge that I have gained from all sorts of areas. So within a traditional immediate physiotherapy consultation, where there's the expectation that it is already just a musculoskeletal injury, the clinician will be working within an assessment protocol, if you like, to get to some kind of diagnosis, to then provide some physical treatment to change the symptoms that are affecting the person in front of them, which absolutely is a good starting point. And that is fundamentally what I will do. But within my history taking, my assessment of the individual as they're sharing who they are and different aspects of their life, I am also assessing immediately their personality traits, how they are holding themselves, and how they are presenting themselves to me. And very much, I guess, body reading in terms of their language and their unconscious movements, as much as a formal, right, what's your range of movement at such and such a joint, or just the simple questions around when did it start, what makes it easier, what makes it worse, and a process of elimination, which is the standard orthopedic assessment and clinical reasoning process, I will have already jumped out from that and be asking questions that will also influence a person's issue. And I will always, as part of my history taking, ask about life stress, its management or lack of. I will ask about someone's nutrition, hydration. I will always ask about someone's quality of sleep. And then about their movement history. And what I always find with those open questions is that there will be the alluding to, if not the really obvious answers that I can pinpoint as those are massive contributors to the issues that the person is presenting to me with.
And I think a lot of us who get into sport look for the more obvious answers, for the obvious from our perspective. Closer to the source of the pain is where you look first. And I think that the more time I spend in sport, the further afield you're looking. And you seem to be the person who's just looking further afield than many others, and looking at a lot of dynamic movements as well as personality and stress and
I think starting from the premise that every individual that presents themselves to me absolutely is unique, and the limitation of working from an objective data point of view is that whatever evidence base you are working from has normalized people. Whether that's from what is it that you need to have reached to say it's dysfunctional, or what is it that you are working towards in order to be optimal. And if you only work within that paradigm, anybody that presents to you, you are purely helping them to get closer to normal. And one person who walks in who's got ridiculously flexible range of movement is as normal as somebody else who has very little range of movement. And to say that one person is going to get back pain versus somebody else, or needs to strengthen a certain thing in order to be more successful, unfortunately, it's not as simple as that, because the nervous system is related to that individual as far as their preferences, their emotions, their thoughts, their experience in life. And if you take all of that into consideration, to compare them against a set of data and normals becomes pretty blunt.
It does, and you find things that can cancel each other out, and you lose the evidence of both. And I think all of medicine is realizing this at the same point. And coming from an engineering background and having spent more time doing statistics than I believe than the average doctor, and of course my job was very statistics based as well. I guess it was clear to me quite early on that this is what happens when you do, whether it's epidemiology or really any analysis of one group, is they get normalized, and you need to do that to get the number you're interested in. But then when you apply that, you need to remember what happened to get that number, and remember which details have now been covered over and have been lost, and you can't recreate that information. We don't know. Information, once you've done the stats, you can't then learn extra things by just winding things backwards. You need to find out about the individual, and knowing which things get lost in certain types of analysis is good, just because you know what to look for. It's not going to tell you what the answer is, but it is kind of disappointing seeing a lot of people get they get more confidence from looking at studies and looking at data, and they're getting a bit of confidence in the way they're prescribing to their clients or patients, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It feels good. Confidence does feel great.
It's safe.
And
there needs to be some kind of accountability in terms of from a treating a public point of view that you are competent and you're not doing dangerous things.
And you're not making up things entirely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But evidence-based medicine is only one aspect of proving or expecting that something is going to work because you did it in a way that in research had previously suggested is helpful.
Yeah, the other thing I think has really helped form my perspectives on issues like this, where we're breaking down what at the edge of science, we're kind of breaking things down and realizing how rough around the edges it is. A concept that's really helped me is looking at a few particular examples and reading a few books of people who have summarized the scientific history of certain topics. And the one thing you see the whole way through is that the leaders in the field have high confidence at all the time. Whenever they come up with a new idea, they're pretty confident they've got it right. And then 10 years later, they find out again, oh, no, this is actually what's going on. And they're still just as confident. And the idea that we have physiotherapy and human biomechanics wrapped up here in 2019 is just not going to happen. We're going to look back in 50 years' time and think they thought that's what running was. And we'll have so many more details on the way the human body moves and the way the nervous system especially is just such a black box at the moment. We can see there's a few things happen if we pull here, something else moves over there. But yeah, just the idea that we've got it wrapped up and that anyone who's pushing around the rough edges of science is just making stuff up is craziness. I think that's where we have to be looking more to really see what's going on. And I'm not that optimistic we're going to get I think we'll be moving faster by treating people as individuals than doing more stats. Definitely. I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we need both full steam ahead. But yeah, it's really exciting to hear people treating people like individuals more. And it's not to say physios don't, but it's a continuum thing. So how much do you treat it like?
And there is like an individual stages of treatment as well. I am very grateful for physios here in this country, as much as the UK, who are working acutely in a clinic. I have chosen to be hands-off and to work with people at the point where they are willing and ready to take responsibility for their movement. But the stage before that, classic, simple ankle sprain, I no longer do acupuncture. I no longer do ultrasound. I no longer do a lot of strapping or taping. I no longer do effleurage or lymph massage, because one clinician cannot do everything. But I work directly with physios who work in a clinic, who have access to those tools, are up to date and continuing in their expertise to do those things, to work with that individual in providing that treatment. And then that individual needs to have the recognition that that's just the first step, and that on from there, if they want to get back to what they are saying they would like to achieve or need to achieve, then there is a next step.
Yeah, that's a really cool model, having your primary, it's not primary caregiver, that's already a word that's been used, but your primary movement specialist, if this is the model that ends up being more successful. It's quite cool having that primary person being very holistic, but having a strong network so that you still have access. You're not throwing away access to all the other tools that should be used as much as possible. Sure. Yeah, that's really cool. So when you're seeing clients, we'll try to bring it a little closer to running. Are there things that you're seeing over and over again? And if it ends up happening that all of the running problems are not running problems, they're lifestyle problems, then say so. But with the runners that you do see, what are the trends?
I think the number one thing that I almost do as a number one without recognition of their fitness or their previous background is I will look at their breathing in relation to their trunk strength. Trunk, I mean torso, everything from the hips up to the shoulder girdle. And the reason that I focus so highly on other aspects of their life rather than when they are running, or if that's their thing, is because they spend far more time using their trunk and breathing in those other aspects of their life than when they are going running. So I will assess them doing some particular tests or moves or stuff that I'm asking them to do from a breathing point of view or a core and a trunk movement point of view, and I will relate it through to them in their running such that they can see the significance of it. But what I will then do is come back to how are they doing those things in their daily life, because if those aren't changed, resolved, they can focus all they like on trying to address the things that aren't working so well in their running, but they will always be hamstrung, to pardon the phrase, quite literally, of hamstrings being also very important in running. But there definitely is, without exception, a challenge in people's cardiorespiratory capability that then has direct implication on their form, because their capacity to switch on through their trunk and to hold well in their trunk whilst their arms and their legs power them in their running, and whether that is on a flat going as fast as they can, or that's pressing up a huge mountain, or completely going hell for leather and fell running down a hillside of great technical difficulty.
Right. Well, it definitely came as a surprise for you to say breathing is the first thing that came to mind. When I think of breathing, I just think of the mechanical air must flow in, air must flow out, and the greater throughput you have, the more CO2 and oxygen diffusion you have. Yep. Are you taking that from a different perspective, or from a perspective that adds more details than the simple model that I've just put forward?
So your what you've just explained is exactly correct. But one's assumption that when you take a breath in, you are effectively perfusing the circulation that is then going to the rest of your body.
And I imagine it as one parameter, like the breath is big, medium, or small. Do you see a few more parameters, like the depth of the breath, and maybe how much in the shoulders, how much in the... Okay, so you talk us through the individual's
perception of those parameters. So they might be thinking, I'm taking a massive breath. But then when I get them to put their hands on a certain area or to be in a different position and to do the same thing, they then actually realize,
doesn't even move.
I'm not.
Wow, okay. I see where you're going. Okay, so what else do you look for as far as breathing? I'm interested in the details now in this particular direction.
One's capability to breathe efficiently will then optimize the energy left to do other stuff. If you're actually using more energy just to do that oxygen carbon dioxide exchange, then you haven't got the energy available to power other muscles. If you're using muscles that should be part of your musculoskeletal movement system and you're in fact using them to help your respiratory system, then you're not going to move so well, so whether that's fast or long or powerfully.
Yeah, 100%. We have, you could see it as an oxygen quota if you wanted to normalize between two people, and you want as much of that oxygen going to your legs, and having to put it to the diaphragm, and putting more to the diaphragm is, you're going to have to put some amount to the diaphragm, but the minimum is the optimum here.
Yeah.
So what, how should optimum breathing feel for the person doing the breathing?
So I think a difficulty that I frequently have to rectify is people's understanding of good quality breathing. Unfortunately, there is a general misbelief that to belly breathe is good for you.
Okay.
And from my own research, my own experience, my learnings from a wide variety of sources, the mechanism of breathing comes from absolutely a diaphragm contraction, but then also a rib cage movement. That's why we have a rib cage that is mobile, with joints at the back and soft cartilage at the front. But
right, because if you wanted more protection, if it was just to be protection, it would be like a turtle shell.
Totally.
Right? But no, it's very flexible.
Absolutely. And therefore, it needs to be able to move in order with the diaphragm to create that negative vacuum that draws in the air. And then what I suggest is also the relevance of breathing or respiration is that rib cage creates the frame off of which the rest of our body can hold itself up. So if one thinks about standing up against gravity from being suspended from the top down, as opposed to being stacked from the ground up, you have to move from a place of decompression. And the easiest way to justify that is from the size of our feet. If we were to take a step forwards and for our weight to land on that foot, you would shatter your heel, because the surface area of your foot relative to the weight of the rest of you means that that tiny bone, whether that's the bones in your forefoot or the heel, the calcaneus at the back, if you literally as a dead weight landed on that just in walking, let alone jumping down a stair or running, you'd shatter those bones. So how do we not? It's because our tissues draw up through our body as we greet the ground. How do they most optimally do that? From drawing up through our skeleton, from the top then down. And the mechanism that creates the greatest decompression is that of our ribs in inspiration. So when you take a breath in and you expand, just like an air balloon when it's fully filled, and you put more heat in at the bottom so the air expands, the balloon, yes, it will go up in the atmosphere, but it will also have greater tensile force expanding outwards. And my belief is that that's how we were designed to hold ourselves, and with which to then move freely in all degrees of direction, and to then maintain integrity in our joints and to work through our tissues that are literally linked from top to bottom.
Yeah, so I can see how the default position is that the bones take compression and the muscles take tension, and that's not incorrect. They do those things, but there's also more going on. And you see the diagram on the wall, and it's got the bones, and you're like, oh yeah, I can see the force going down the spine. But what happens when you put all the organs there and wrap it up in fascia and then wrap it in muscle, and you realize that all these structures have they can have tension, they can hold tension, the organs can hold some degree of compression. So now the torso has quite a different model to the spine up one side and this big kind of empty cavity.
Totally.
Yeah, so I can see the legs obviously take the force of impact more like a spring, and there's the tension compression there.
Yeah.
And that maybe doesn't change too much from your perspective.
No, in the sense that if you think about energy being never ending, it just changes in its form.
Yeah, yeah.
So when your foot greets the ground, you have a compressive force or a ground reaction force, and that goes up through the body. But if that body is held in its true elasticity, it has the capability to absorb some of that compressive force and to rebound from it.
Yeah.
But if the body has lost that capability to rebound, then the energy is absorbed.
Yeah.
And that is where, as well created as our shock absorbers are, so that is the cartilage in your knee, the discs between your joints of your spine.
That's right. The energy has to go somewhere.
And if those compressive, by design, or shock absorbing elements of our body are overused, abused, they're going to start to break down. But if you are using them within their capability, aka you are working from a model where the body has the capacity to decompress as well as compress in its movement, then you are keeping an equilibrium.
Yeah, and I think most people would describe the fairly up to scratch with the way they describe the legs, but the way you describe the torso, this changes a lot because you've got the pressure of your lungs increasing and decreasing, and you've got the whole core, which is in pretty bad shape for many people. So talk me through some more details on how having a certain amount of air in your lungs affects the way your torso moves as you're running.
Sure. So if you have a rib cage that has the capacity to expand and to be held in a what I would call decompressed position, so no longer is the front of your trunk collapsing into your abdomen, it's being held up.
So what's holding it up? Is that the spine kind of pulling back, or is that a deep breath that's propping it up?
It's instigated by a deep breath, but what that deep breath does is it creates length and stretch on all of the postural muscles that then support the spine. And if then our torso muscles that create a cylinder around the trunk are engaged, you can maintain that length and that decompression even on a breath out. But that's not how most people breathe. And I'm not suggesting that that's how we should breathe all the time when we're relaxing on a sofa, watching a Welland film or anything else. But when we go to move, our body, in order to move well and maintain its health and capability in all its parts, should switch on with that kind of activation.
And it sounds impossibly hard to connect to consciously. Do you feel like when you're addressing someone that clearly has a maladaptive breathing pattern, that are you giving them drills or movements that just help build conscious awareness of the muscles, or is it all just subconscious? You give them a drill and they automatically pick up the way to do it. How much is conscious and how much is subconscious?
Totally. So I work with both, and I know I've been successful when A, the person goes, wow, that feels great, and B, they understand why. So I will spend time, which obviously time is money and is valuable, but for me it's worth giving the individual the insight into why they need to do the thing that I'm asking them to do. They then have a go. And I will then use various cues and instructions and prompts to help them do the thing that I'm trying to get them to do.
That's
so that
right.
would
Like,
then
you're
be
opening the door, but
unconscious.
they're walking through to some degree.
Yeah. So what that then leads to is they have been successful in the doing of it. They have the right drill or the right cue that makes sense to them, but that is enabling them to go off and do it, practice it successfully. Most importantly, intrinsically, they feel that it's good to do. And again, that's where I would say I work somewhat differently from other clinicians or professionals that work with people from a physical point of view, is that there is an innate intelligence in the body that when you enable someone the space to come back to feeling what's going on in them, they will actually start to have the right answers.
Yeah.
And all I do, as you mentioned, is open up the door or create the safe space for them to start to explore in that.
Yeah, I totally buy into this. And fortunately, I've had the desire to experiment with my own movement for many years now, and found some of these doors to my own movement myself, and walked through and come back out of them because some of them are wrong. But the more you explore, the more control you realize you have over the way you move. And
Absolutely.
it's just impossible to describe to myself 10 years ago that this is what it feels like to run a stride, just a single movement of the leg the whole way around. This is what it actually could feel like. And to myself 10 years ago, there was run hard or harder or slower. And the way my body achieved that was genuinely mysterious. It just all kind of happened. It was just all autonomous, and the problems with it were just as autonomous as the few bits that were good. I totally buy into that way of sharing the insights, or even less sharing the insights, but it's almost like asking a question that if they attempt to answer it, will actually see the point you wanted them to prove. And just getting them to do an exercise, they realize that in order to do that, they figure out something else. And it's
so
really
rather
interesting.
than it being overwhelming, it very much is empowering, because it's a very simple thing that they end up practicing, but it makes such a big difference because it was the thing that needed to happen. It was the linchpin that was holding them back. And as said, very often it will start with being something around their breathing, and that then offers the opportunity to address the other mechanical issues that are also happening. And obviously those are frequently seen in running as well. There was a point I just wanted to share for the listeners about the way you described the torso, just in case they didn't quite get the picture. I think the tongue is another really interesting example here. So the tongue is a very unique structure. There's no hard inner bone or cartilage to it, yet we can extend it. We can pull it back, and we can do all sorts of things. And the tongue, unlike the torso, has a fixed volume. So it's pressurized. Well, it's not pressurized, but as soon as you contract it, it does not compress. So if you contract the certain muscles around the outside, then it lengthens because the volume must stay the same. So this is how many creatures get dexterity in a limb, or whatever you want to call it, like a tongue. And so there's a similar thing that's happening with the body. There's certain mechanical properties that have to be preserved. And if you've got this tension around the outside, then that constrains the movement to hopefully a way that you want it. And you could be too rigid, and you can be too floppy. But there is a certain amount of tension that constrains some of the mechanical properties. And to say that that's not influencing it, I think you just have to look at the tongue and realize that, you can do all these things with the tongue, and all you are doing is constraining the direction
just to maintain pressure, you are forcing the tongue to move in a certain direction. To maintain volume, the tongue must respond in a certain way. And the same with the torso. Yeah, yep. The tissue has to go somewhere. It has certain compressibility, certain tensions. So yeah, it influences everything, and especially being the center of your body, everything pins onto it.
For sure,
it's so important,
and that is the significance.
So hopefully that clarifies a few things if that was totally new, and it was pretty new for me as well. But yeah, it just dawned on me that of course that's just so important. And so I think some concept that you were almost touching on just before is neuromuscular connection.
Yes.
The ability to connect better with what our muscles are doing. And describing my movement and my running 10 years ago, there was no consciousness, there was no conscious connection with the way I was moving. So I would describe that as unconsciously incompetent, when I just didn't know what to look for and the movement patterns were bad. And as you become more aware, the first step, I think you can describe it from here, is to just become a little bit more aware of what you can consciously activate or deactivate. So you can take it from there, and how you might talk a patient through that.
So with everybody, I would start with giving them a reflection of what is the reality of their movement right now. And I always use photos, and more I will use video, not to do any kind of whizzy analysis with superimposed angles or graphics on the top, just purely because even when we look in the mirror at ourselves, generally it's just to check that we are socially presentable and vaguely appropriate for whatever it is that we're about to do or walk into. We don't spend the time to look at what is happening. We make assumptions, and where we are now will be the outworking of what we've got away with thus far. So we still think we're straight because nothing has told us that we're not. We still think that we can go in a straight line, and that our left foot clearly lands underneath our left hip and faces forwards, because that's what walking is. And it's not until I video someone and then we sit down and we play it back that they start to notice stuff they were utterly oblivious of beforehand. And that's then the next, I think, very important step in my journey with a client, is that I'm allowing them the space to just look and to start to comment. And most often I'll have a response of, well, I can't really see anything. But we then just start to look at a few details, and always I am waiting for the individual to notice something themselves.
So empowering once you realize that this is not some like superhuman that can observe me in ways that I can't observe it. It's
absolutely,
they've just got more experience, and now you're at level 1 and your physio is at level 100, but you're now at level 1 and you can get to level 2 and so on. It's nothing magical, but it is hard and takes time and perseverance.
And from their new awareness of how they move, they will immediately move differently, because once you've discovered something, you can't undiscover it, especially when you immediately recognize its implications. So that has a huge bearing on their nervous system, in terms of that intellectual learning, but it is also intrinsically linked to feeling and identity of self, which goes way deeper in the person as an individual, as opposed to just some cerebral, oh yes, my foot turns out slightly and I would look nicer when I walked it if I kept it straight.
So this is perhaps just to rephrase, just check that we're both on the same page. There's something to experiencing as opposed to knowing.
Yeah,
Is that kind
absolutely.
of the same thing? And
Yeah.
once you've, someone can tell you something your whole life,
Totally.
and you're like, yeah, I know. And then when you experience, like, man, why don't I do something about it? And it just makes no sense. It's
Absolutely.
human condition, and it's such a powerful tool when someone really clicks in that way.
It. We're in an age where we have all the knowledge we could possibly get our
People
hands
are
on.
still doing crazy
And
things.
yet, exactly, everybody knows how to lose weight, and yet people can't. And the difference is taking the intellectual knowledge and having it meaningfully presented and empowered for it to make a difference. And that's what I seek to do.
And I think that's a really scary place to get a patient to. Suddenly they feel a little more control, they're empowered, maybe their confidence goes up, but maybe their ability to make the right decisions with their movement still isn't there. And maybe I have more concern about this than you do, because most of the times I have made a change in the past, I've caused a problem further down the line.
Sure.
When I make a change, I think, oh, this is the answer. Yeah, we've got it. And then I make the change, and 4 weeks later, I've created a new problem.
Yeah.
So how do you caution people once they get to that stage of being consciously incompetent, and they're trying to move to being consciously competent without being without ruining themselves in the process?
Yeah. Again, it's part of the way that we've been taught to function through education and all sorts of modern society reinforcement, that we get the answer and then we hone down too far and lose connection with the feeling of, well, what difference is it making? So once someone has become aware of something that they can see it is not helping them, and they can also see how they can start to make a difference, because I have done it from a perspective of them feeling what's going on and noticing when they're truly doing it right and how the body responds to that and what it tells the individual in the moment, versus I'm now looking the right shape, I'm doing the right movement, my intellectual head says I've got it because Claire is saying yes, or whatever other kind of external validation they are seeking. It means that they will be much better in going out and being autonomous and staying conscious about their level of competence, if one wants to use those degrees of expertise. So I'm very clear with an individual that I have given them the first stage of, this is what is worth focusing on and working with. It's not the panacea for everything. It's not suddenly going to make the difference and now you're sorted. But as you explore the difference that it makes, there will be other things that start to become obvious. And if someone is willing to work with themselves with that generosity and that gentleness, there won't be that crash and burn 4 weeks later when they thought they were going to be awesome and it wasn't quite as smooth as they thought.
So would you describe that as more of a process focus than like a specific goal focus? This is like a different lens to look through their progress. And
I think it's too, in the same way as medicine is too narrow-minded to think that we are purely physical, and to treat, assess, and monitor purely physical outcomes is sufficient to enable someone to be everything that they could be. I think similarly, to assume that someone is the same today, tomorrow, and the next day as the day before is also too narrow-minded. So as much as a high-level performing athlete is always thinking, well, that was my PB and now I've done that and I'm gonna do this and this and this in my polarized training to get to there, great in terms of a framework and something to guide direction. But the individual today, in 6 months' time, at the end of that polarized training block, is going to be 6 months older, is going to have cells that have turned over for 6 months, is going to have 6 months worth of life that will have nurtured, supported, enabled, also caused survival, challenge, difficulty, damage. So on any single day, we are in this juxtaposition of managing ourselves as a living organism that is moment by moment having to respond and react to the external environment and work with the best that we can be to optimize our internal environment. And that means that you can't take anything for granted. So what worked yesterday isn't always going to work. Someone who has a great nutritional strategy for their X distance race that's worked for 5 years up to now, and then suddenly they have absolutely ridiculous gastrointestinal distress over several races. Goes, well, what the heck? It worked up until now. Doesn't mean to say that it's going to work going forwards. And it's not that they were wrong in choosing that. It's just that their body has adapted, changed. They're in a different season. They might have gone from premenopausal to most menopausal. They might have changed.
That's just an obvious change. We don't even know the not obvious changes that are happening.
The far more subtle day-to-day, hour-to-hour stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm arguing for the medical system to treat people as individuals, and you're arguing that individuals shouldn't even be treated as individuals, divide them up further.
In the sense that any individual has responsibility for themselves. So if we're empowering individuals to take responsibility for themselves, looking to understand themselves as best they can, they will be the best person to treat themselves.
It's really empowering, giving people the right lens to look through their problems, as opposed to giving them the answer that they need now and sending them on their way.
Yes, because going full circle, I thought if I learned enough at university and I learned enough postgraduate and I learned enough in all the courses that I'd done, then I would be able to give people the answers that they needed to help them.
You just rattle off, I remember that. I've seen the study, I know the answer. And we're just not there. And I don't know if we will be there. The human body is too complex.
That, fortunately, was the conclusion that I came to before having a professional mental crisis. And recognizing that no one person can have the answers, but can be a very, very clear lens or torch pointing an individual in the right direction for them to take it forwards with the necessary sufficient feedback and support.
And there's a lot of burden on the client or the patient here as well, because for a lot of people that's not the answer they want to hear. There is this culture that we're trying to throw out of the quick fix, and the sooner we get rid of that, the better. People have this expectation that they'll go to the physio and they'll tell them the answer and they'll be on their way. But you get what you pay for, and the more you pay, the longer it takes, because you're seeing someone who's more thorough. And it's I think anyone who's wanting to go to the physio for an injury should really just book a whole year. I mean, it's going to it's often going to take that long to truly understand what's going on. And when you pull one piece of the spider web, all the other parts start moving as well, because there's all these connections, and it's
But
just
by
not
the
going to be
same
simple.
token, what I really enjoy in working with people as opposed to robots or machines or computers is that there is no perfect. So I'm as happy to see someone for a one-off mini consultation to give them the little bit of thing that they need, whether that's a particular piece of advice or insight or example that is sufficient for them at that time within their awareness and needs and expectations to benefit.
And changing the lens whereby somebody looks at their own problems through improves the way that they respond to challenges in the future every time.
Yeah.
It's not just a one-off improvement. It's something that keeps giving.
Yeah.
So yeah, you actually almost have it easier, because you can, if someone needs to resolve a certain injury, they might need 10 goes at the physio to see a benefit. But if you can give them a perspective change, then maybe just one session, it does have some benefit. So at least you're relaxed about just a one-off.
Yeah.
Seeing someone for a one-off.
Because at the end of the day, one has one's whole life to explore oneself and what one wants to do, and it for oneself, and then in terms of explore the world for what it is. And if you are too serious and are trying too hard to become what you perceive to be this perfection for whatever the goal is in the short term, you, in my humble opinion, will also miss out on the point of life.
Yeah.
And
100%.
so I'm often at the other end of the spectrum, reining people in, going, chill out,
Chill, man.
back off. The sympathetic stress you're putting through your body because of being so paranoid about such and such and limiting such and such is actually shortening your life.
Yeah, and being a high-performing person like you are, do you get the feel, and maybe even know for a fact, that other people think that you must be pushing hard and stressing the whole time to be what you are?
Yeah, I think it can either go one way, in that people assume that I have this superhuman capacity that nobody else does, and that's why I can just pop off and do such and such, and I don't get injured doing such and such, or I'm able to do this, that and the other. And then there's the other end of the camp, where people assume that I must have such a regimented life and be missing out on so much because I'm perceived to do this, that and the other. And funnily enough, I sit somewhere in between. From some people's point of view, the amount of time that I spend on self-care is inordinate, and they couldn't possibly imagine doing anything of the same level. But I think the significance is I don't do that out of imprisoned self-discipline or obsession, perfectionistic self-betterment for the sake of. I do it out of a love for myself and what I love doing. And therefore, it's a joy to be able to do.
Yeah. No, I can't say it any better. And I just experience it all the time. There is this assumption that someone who performs really highly at something that they perceive to be, that the other person perceives to be challenging, they kind of assume that from your perspective it's the same challenge, the same. And running is just such an obvious example, as the vast majority of people think that it's just punishment the whole time. And for some people, I don't deny it, it certainly is for some people, and it definitely is for me if I have time off and start running again. But you have to realize from that point onwards, I actually intrinsically enjoy running and training and hard sessions. I get a kick out of the sessions that kind of destroy me, and that's a big part of why I'm doing it. It's not pushing some masochistic
And there's big difference.
enterprise of my own. It's I couldn't have really said it any better. And we find ourselves with certain interests and certain things that we intrinsically enjoy, and moving your attention more onto finding the things you really enjoy and then doing them as well as possible, and just nothing's a chore from that point onwards. Being able to take that approach is just key. And working with younger people as well, who are a little less savvy, this is something I'm pushing all the time, is they're just super competitive and super energetic, and just telling them to back off and be like, when you say that you don't actually care about the result, you just want to have fun, they're just blown away. Like they think that you're just obsessed with the result because you sometimes get good results. Not the case. I think you need to love what you're doing for whatever it is in itself.
And physical health, pursuing excellence from a sporting or physical activity point of view should be perceived to be exactly the same as seeking excellence in any other aspect of life, if that and when that floats your boat. And everybody in their uniqueness has different things that float their boats. I'm very happy that my accountant is really excited about numbers and gets a high out of, probably not my little pathetic business, but in terms of the other things that they do. Unfortunately, they're willing to help me do something that really doesn't float my boat, and actually more significantly stresses me out.
Totally.
So I don't expect everybody to do the amount of physical self-maintenance or time in looking after themselves as I do. I would say absolutely my passion has always been in enjoying physical movement in whatever that is: swimming, biking, running, stand-up paddleboarding, at the moment paragliding. But that's not what I would suggest is, that's how everyone needs to do life. But by the same token, I take responsibility for my finances, and therefore I have an accountant. And I would say that everybody, no matter how little their physicality matters to them as a pursuit or a leisure activity or their day-to-day, they cannot have a good quality of life in any other respect if they don't have a fundamental level of health and well-being. And I think that's where the rubber hits the road, because as you mentioned earlier, in this quick fix and now mentality that we have, the assumption is that everything is fine, and when it's not, one can easily just get something new or replace it or press enter or hand over the credit card, and one can carry on without that respect for our physical well-being that unfortunately just doesn't work like that.
Wow, I think that's a great way to end the conversation, arguing to be holistic. And we've had a very holistic conversation. We touched a lot of things I didn't really expect to. So maybe there's and I was actually expecting to spend a lot of time on movement for running. So I think there's definitely space to come back and have another crack at maybe some more of your insights into working with runners. But I'm getting a little hungry, so maybe let's call it there. Thank you so much, Claire, for coming in. If people are interested in finding you and your work, where's the best place?
So I literally have clients all over the world, and with that, I'm supporting them online. So with all my background, doing hands-on stuff as well as assessing people physically, I feel confident and certainly have had amazing results in working with people just purely on the screen. So there isn't the need to see me physically, although that is always a bonus. And I enjoy still visiting Auckland, see people there, see people in Rotorua, and then see people as and when they want to visit, and hopefully including yourself in the South Island in Wanaka as well. My main contacts would be the obvious, so find me by googling applied movement, and I do have a Facebook page, as easy to contact me on Messenger, googling me, Claire Akin-Smith. I'm an open book. I walk my talk, and anybody that would like to work with me, I'm pretty easy to contact, and I work with everybody uniquely, so there's no set protocol. It would be, let's start with a chat and see if I can help you.
Cool. And I'll leave those links in the in the post that will go out with the podcast. So thanks very much for coming in, Claire. It's been a pleasure.
Ace. Thank you, Gene.
If you're enjoying the Perfect Flow podcast and want more value from it in the future, there are some ways you can support it. The first is to rate or leave a positive review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or other platforms where it's available. The second is to share this podcast or specific episodes on social media or with friends. The third is to get involved more directly through the Perfect Flow page on Facebook, where I'm trying to construct a more interactive community. I want Perfect Flow to belong to the listeners, and if you tell me more about the topics you are most interested in, or even specific guests, I'll do my best to make it happen. This is your opportunity to be part of something that answers your questions and adds value to your life. Another good reason to follow Perfect Flow on Facebook is that I post links to new episodes, blogs, and anything I find useful to this page. It's a great way to follow my training, racing, and learning. Another great way to stay engaged is to subscribe to beveridge.nz. This way you will get podcasts and blogs emailed to you, avoiding the clutter of Facebook. I don't know where this project will take us, but the reception so far has been positive. Who knows where we might be in a few years.